Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Event Tech plus Martech, how event technology completes your marketing stack. I'm Claudia Tirico, Features Editor at Demand Gen Report, and I'll be moderating this presentation. It's going to be a good one, so let's get the show on the road. Then I just wanted to roll through some housekeeping slides. First off, let's get social. We encourage everyone to follow along on LinkedIn and Twitter with the hashtag Martech. You can also connect with all of us at the Twitter handles on your screen. For new to Demand Gen Report, here's our story. We are an online media company that publishes a variety of content and resources, including daily news, weekly email newsletters, special reports, original research, and much more. Check us out at demandgenreport.com and join over 50,000 subscribers to our weekly newsletters by subscribing to DGR today. We're using the On24 platform where you can access all of the information you need from this toolbar. You can also tweet from directly within this platform using the Twitter widget on the left-hand side of your screen. We also encourage you to ask our presenter questions during the session, and to do so, you have to simply click the Q&A widget at the top right corner of your screen. Today's session is slated to run about 25 to 35 minutes, with a few minutes for Q&A following. You can submit those questions using this Q&A widget at any time. Since today's session is being recorded, all attendees will get the on-demand link to rewatch or share with peers and colleagues. Okay, now that I've got all the housekeeping slides out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. I'm super excited to introduce our speaker today, Brad Gillespie, VP of Enterprise Marketing for Cvent. Brad currently leads enterprise marketing, corporate marketing, and events for Cvent, the leading provider of meetings and event software. Prior to Cvent, Brad was Chief Marketing Officer for Octave and Global Vice President of Marketing and Events for SiriusDecisions. His career has focused on go-to-market strategy, market analysis, product development and launch, channels and alliances, and branding and communications. So, without further ado, I'm going to kick things off to Brad to get it started.
Thanks, Claudia. Terrific introduction. Very excited to be here with you and the audience today. So this topic is near and dear to my heart as a marketer who has owned the events function for the better part of my marketing career. And we're excited to really talk about how what we see in the marketplace as events tech and Martech coming together to complete the marketing tech stack. And the context that we want to put that in for today's talk is to really talk about the power and impact of live events and how by integrating a live events strategy with your overall marketing strategy, marketers and event leaders will see a tremendous uplift on both sides of the overall marketing program, both the event side as well as the marketing side. And then we'll get into how the technology really applies and how they're coming together, both Event Tech and Martech, to make this vision a reality. So 4 parts or chapters of our talk today. The first is the power of live. This is essentially all of the reasons that it makes sense for us to think about doing a live meeting and events program as a part of our overall marketing mix. But with all of those benefits that we'll talk about comes some pretty significant challenges. So we'll address those head on so that you can understand what you're going to have to deal with as you go about this process of implementing an events program at your organization. Next, I'll cover defining the mission of events and how the mission for some events can be very different than the mission for other events. And then we'll conclude with what I think are a handful of very practical, actionable next steps that you can take into your organization to move things forward. Claudia did a nice introduction, won't spend any time here, but just one thing to add is I'm a marketer that has had the events function and that responsibility for the better part of my career. And I think that does give me a bit of a perspective that I hope kind of comes out in in the talk today. Okay, so the power of live, and what do we mean by this? Obviously, if you're a marketer or an event professional in this session today, you have either attended an event or produced your own event, and you're going to have an opinion on the various types of events that we may talk about today. I personally love this part of marketing for all of the creative reasons and that side that we get to express as marketers, but also for the impact that live events have. So a few of these here. The events portion of your program spend, the average B2B organization today is spending greater than 20% of program spend. So this is an area of significant investment for most of our organizations. Also, the events channel is typically in the top 1 or 2 in terms of most effective channels that we can deploy as marketers. And last but not least, our CEOs and executives, although they want data to back this up, love live events. They are convinced, like we are, that the live events channel presents some unique opportunities that no other channel can deliver as marketers. So live events come with a number of different benefits. They help us create awareness in audiences and in markets where we may not have any or we may not have enough awareness. They help us educate our various audiences, be that a buyer, be that a customer, a partner, etc. They help us create demand. They help us advance opportunities that are already in place. And believe it or not, events today are still a place where business gets done. These are likely don't come as a surprise to most of you. They're the more obvious ones. But there's a number of other benefits that come along with live events. We have the opportunity to inspire our audience, to evangelize our product or our solution. For customers, live events are an opportunity to interact and engage, to drive adoption and drive advocacy. They're a great opportunity to deepen relationships. And they're a great opportunity to learn. As an attendee, the obvious opportunity to learn from various interactions at a live event. And then as an event producer, the opportunity to learn from our audience, specifically customers. And so with this in mind, we need to think about what are the benefits and what are the actual results that we should expect from a live events program. The good news is each of these areas of value is measurable. Some are very straightforward. Creating demand. How would we measure how many leads or opportunities may have resulted from our event? Advancing opportunities. What is the difference that interactions at a specific event might have had on an existing opportunity? Areas like that are fairly straightforward, but how do we measure other areas of value, like the deepening of relationships or how much we were able to learn? Some of these may be a little more nuanced and a bit obscure, but rest assured they're all measurable. And it's a good thing that they're measurable because ultimately we're going to have to formulate a view of return on the events program. And the more ways we have to impact value, the better. We have to have the data to defend and support a live event program at a level of detail and with a level of scrutiny that's not going to change anytime soon. It's only going to increase. So let me offer a simple formula for calculating event ROI. For each of those areas of value, we're going to assign a dollar amount. And later in this talk, we'll touch on some of these, and then Cvent has many resources to help you understand how to make these calculations. But for each of those areas, we need to be able to arrive at a dollar value. We also need to be able to capture all of the various costs associated with producing or participating in an event. And so we take the dollar amount that we've calculated for all of those combined benefits and subtract the total cost, and then we divide that by, again, the total cost to produce or participate in the event. So to summarize, the work required here is to really understand how to quantify the benefits. And in the follow-up to this talk, we'll point you to a number of different resources to understand how to calculate it, as well as to understand where this data might be to go and find it. But we also have to do the work to capture all of the various costs associated. And again, we'll point you to some resources to make sure that you're capturing a very comprehensive view of your live events program costs. So now let's shift and talk a little bit about the environment that we are in as marketers and event pros and some of the challenges that we face. Show me the return, says the CEO. So let's face it, as marketers, we have to prove the value of our investments to our executives. Some of them don't trust the work we do. Some feel like many of us are disconnected from the financial realities of the business, and that we don't understand what our core mission is, and that we fundamentally, in some cases, don't understand the business and understand the contributions that marketing should make. So we've got to deal with this, and we've got to deal with it in a way that addresses the issue head on, and that's going to be through data. Demonstrating event ROI is not easy, said the CMO. This chart from our friends at Marketing Profs makes that pretty clear. Of all the channels and tactics, and in their view and in their assessment, live events and conferences are among the very most difficult in terms of tracking ROI. So let's add to that there are so many options for events. We can do hosted events. We can do sponsored events. We can do happy hours. We can do exhibitions. We can do industry events and trade shows and conferences and road shows. And so where to start and which events make sense for us? So many options. And then there's so much data. For some of you, this may be a new part of your data equation. For others that have been producing events and looking at event data, you understand how overwhelming this can be. So this one's actually a bit of a double-edged sword. While there is so much data, that's also part of the power of live and why events are so important in the first place. So all of that event data essentially comes from these various touch points along what we refer to as the attendee journey. And the journey starts in the pre-event stages and continues to when the attendee's on site with you. And it even continues after the event in the way that you follow up. And so the question here for all of us as marketers is, are we listening? Are we listening to the events channel to really understand what this data is and what it's telling us and how we can start to use it? So now let's talk about mission and the mission for your events and how they can be different. So as we just saw, the attendee journey is the basis for the mission. In defining the mission, we can first understand where is the attendee in their journey and what type of journey are they on? Are they on a buyer's journey? Are they on a customer journey? Or is there some other type of journey that our attendee and our audience is on? And understanding that stage, where is my attendee, is essential to defining the mission for your event. So for example, if the attendee is on a buyer's journey, and we were to think of a very simple process of awareness to consideration to close, and if we were to understand that their time with you at an event is at consideration stage in their buyer's journey, how would that change your interactions? How would that focus the discussion and focus the content and define the mission for that event? Or if that attendee is on a customer journey where they're at your event to more deeply adopt your product or solution, how would that change the mission for your event? You may be in an industry where attendance is required, perhaps to get a certification, or for regulatory requirements they're required to attend your event. How does the mission change for that type of attendee journey? So we want to understand the stage that our attendee is in with us and their relationship with us, and have a very purposeful mission for their time with us at the event. And we want to do that because we want to optimize their experience. We want their time to be productive. We want it to be highly personalized. We want to reach them in every channel possible. We want the content and the interactions to be relevant and timely. So what does this start to look like in action? And how do events and marketing as two teams start to come together to look at this journey in a similar light? So let's set up this scenario. We're attending an industry conference, and we're going to look at a sample buyer's journey. Again, we're that simplistic journey of awareness, consideration, purchase or close is involved. And if you just dig in a little bit and look at the various channels and tactics that are required to do this well, we're touching on a lot of different areas and a lot of different teams, and ultimately many different tools and technologies and processes to really execute this at the right level. If we were to add up all of the discrete systems and tactics, and if we were to map all of the teams that would be required to really get aligned to do this well, you can see how quickly this adds up to something that's fairly complex to plan and execute this part of your buyer's journey where you're using a live events program. So this leads us to the next part of the talk and why it's so important to create alignment between the events team and marketing team, and the events processes and marketing processes. And the why we need to do this is really a summary of all those points that we've covered so far. There are so many options available to us today for event options. There's so much data involved. There's so many different ways we could define the mission for an event. The expectations from our C-suite is so high. The various ways that we can create and measure value can be so deep. And the various interactions and tools and channels and tactics and teams required to pull this off. This is the why we need alignment between events and meetings teams. So let's go from the why to the how. So I'm going to leave you with what I hope are some practical things that you can take away that you might think of as 2 ways to start to get organized. The first is to think about a portfolio approach to events, and we'll go into that. And then the next is developing playbooks. So let's talk about a portfolio approach and what we mean by this. This is actually an opportunity if you want to get out a notepad and participate. You can do this right where you are as you're listening and watching. So draw a pyramid here and think about creating some number of tiers. And at the top of this pyramid, in your tier 1, we're going to start to put certain types of events there. And at the bottom of the pyramid, we're going to put other types of events that you currently employ. And then we're going to slowly fill in the middle in between the two. And the criteria you're going to use to get your events organized could be some combination of these. But think about putting the more expensive, more complex events that you do perhaps fewer of at the top of this pyramid, and put the ones that are perhaps less complex or ones that do high quantities of at the bottom. And to help this along, I'll show you how we do this here at Cvent. In our tier 1, we have roughly 25 events each year, which include our most costly, most complex, longer lead cycle, but also ones we have the highest expectations for financially at the top. And those include our annual user conferences, both in the Americas and Europe. They include our large trade shows and industry shows, as well as events that are perhaps a little more complex and those that have the highest expectations for return. And then in the bottom tier, these are events that are largely planned and executed out in the field with very little hands-on help from our teams, but those that we need to know about. And then in between, we have roughly 800 or so events per year in our Tier 2 and Tier 3. And Tier 2 for us really means trade shows where we are sponsoring. They're usually not hosted events. And then in our Tier 3, these are our high volume events that we do out in the field, many events going on simultaneously. So after you have your version of a portfolio together, and perhaps your version 1, this is something that can evolve over time, I would encourage you to take that and then take that into this concept of developing playbooks. And the playbook should consider not only the different tiers of events, but the different types of events, as well as the various teams and stakeholders that are required to pull those off. And I'll show you what that looks like. So for Cvent, we essentially have 3 versions of the playbook. We have a version that our event planning team looks at. We have a version for event and marketing operations. How do we actually execute? And then we have a version that our marketers, and you can think here, sales and marketing and product, all tied together. And you can see this kind of matrixed approach that we've developed here to really get clarity on the various roles and responsibilities, interlock for teams, how processes need to come together across each event tier and each event type. And once you have that in place, you can take it a step further and look at developing an accountability matrix. And this is a simple view of how 2 teams, the event marketing team at Cvent and then what we refer to as our cloud marketing teams, how they work together at each tier and type. And this really helps to bring some clarity to the roles and responsibilities for each team to hold everyone accountable and keep everything moving in the right direction. And the playbooks then become documentation of best practice and of standard operating procedure for every type of event in the portfolio. And they include some summary level information like the teams that are involved, objectives for this particular type of event. We have some basic description on what the meeting consists of, and then we start to go into the scope of responsibility for each part of the team to execute. Okay. Here you see the scope that is specific to the marketing stakeholders as well as the sales stakeholders. And then lastly here, we have kind of deeper level, more detailed documentation of very specific procedures across the event process and life cycle. So hopefully that resonated with you guys, and I think there's likely some in the audience that would recognize kind of this level of detail, and others that may be a little intimidated by it, and that's okay. Everybody has to start somewhere, and what we see, kind of our point of view, because we get to look at this type of thing every day, we see a wide range of maturity in people in various parts of their own journey in getting there. But the point here is really to start thinking about this opportunity that we all have to bring together events and marketing and really execute on the power of live. So I want to leave you with a couple of parting thoughts. First is event tech and Martech are coming together, and it's happening organically. As I've tried to hit on throughout the talk, it's really the reasons for doing this, the benefits of doing it, some of the challenges of doing it, but at the end of the day, it's happening, and it's happening with little effort from vendors like Cvent in the marketplace. You guys as marketers are doing this on your own, and we're starting to see in stack diagrams where event tech is starting to be featured more and more often. And so it's really exciting to see event tech be considered a part of a digital transformation and part of what are typically going to be marketing-led initiatives. And we're really encouraged and excited about what we're seeing in our customer base and in the larger community around the creativity for how the technologies are coming together and the depth at which organizations are starting to integrate and adopt event tech into the Martech stack. Second parting thought is start small. If this feels daunting or a bit overwhelming to you, the portfolio approach and getting your arms around the various types of events that you are doing or thinking about doing is a great place to start. In fact, when we're working with some of our larger organizations, many of them still need to start here. They may be older, more mature companies with fairly mature teams and processes, but it's still a great way to get grounded in this whole journey, is to really understand what your version of this portfolio looks like. And starting small within this could be a particular tier. Think about the tier that stands to have the biggest impact if you really understand what's going on there. Maybe it's your tier ones because they're the largest, most complex, like it is for Cvent. Or maybe it's your version of a tier 3 where you do so many of those events that you really need to understand things at a deeper level. But the point here is to start small, but to start your journey in this direction. So I'd like to thank you. I want to kind of express my appreciation for you spending some of your your day and your week with this content. I hope that you found it valuable. As I mentioned, I'd like to offer some resources to you. We're building a fairly good library around how you can understand the different areas of benefit and quantifying those and developing your version of an ROI model and your version of an events portfolio and your version of playbooks. And we're starting to see some best practices emerge, and we'd like to share those with you as well. And so thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Claudia. Hopefully we have some questions.
Thanks so much, Brad, for that awesome presentation. There were some great insights there. I saw some awesome questions come in, so I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to jump right into those. All right. First one. What event technology tools are key to capture data for marketers?
Yeah, and first of all, thanks everybody for submitting your questions. It's always great to see. So we talked about and covered a few general categories, but if you recall from the talk, there's an opportunity to really capture data at various points along the journey. That starts with your promotion of an event, where you can use your existing marketing automation tools, where you can use your existing event website tools, or if you're a Cvent customer, obviously use ours. And so the first opportunity is to understand how your potential attendee is responding to your offer to attend. Once they're in the registration flow, we want to capture, did they complete the registration? We have an opportunity through Event Tech to understand where a potential attendee abandons the registration process, much like you might abandon a shopping cart, so that we can do remarketing to those individuals that would appear to have expressed some interest but not completed the registration process. So that's a second area. Once the day of event arrives, there's a range of event tech that are required to really complete this picture of the attendee journey and behavior. And that starts with the arrival and check-in process. We obviously want to know that they arrived at the event and that they are in fact attending. There's a category around session attendance. So whether your event has a handful of sessions or whether it's a multi-day, multi-track event, we want to understand which sessions your attendees found valuable. And so to do that, we need to be able to understand which sessions they registered for and which sessions they actually attended. And once the attendee is in a session, we can capture their level of engagement. Did they share on social media a key message? Did they respond to a polling question? Did they respond to a survey question? If your event offers exhibition or trade show, that's another category of event tech. What exhibitors did your attendees find valuable? Who did they visit? Where were they scanned in as leads? All of this data starts to complete that picture of the attendee journey that we mentioned at the top of the call, and then that wealth of data starts to inform how you want to follow up with that attendee. And so connecting the event tech to Martech and sales tech, as we discussed, this is where it really starts to take shape. We want to have predefined post-event plays for both sales and marketing, ideally that are going to benefit from the insights that we just gained from capturing the attendee preferences and behaviors. And so those are the key essential elements. Obviously, I wouldn't be a good marketer if I didn't let everybody know that Cvent, the Cvent platform can accommodate everything that I just mentioned and more. But you can also string together, disparate solutions to do and accomplish what we just described. So that's how I'd address that question, Claudia.
Awesome, thank you. All right, here's another good one. What KPIs should companies track for events?
Yeah, great question. And we touched on both the requirement that businesses are now putting on to events leaders and marketing leaders, in generally speaking, for performance and ROI, specific to events. So some of your events may have a clear revenue objective. You might sell tickets to the event, or you might have an event where a business can be conducted to completion and associate bookings or revenues with your event. So an obvious KPI would be around, did my event generate revenue? Aside from that, they become much more nuanced and a little more difficult to understand. And we talked at length about this in the talk, but let me go into this a little bit. So let's assume for a minute that we're really talking about a commercially focused event where you're bringing together customers or prospects, or you're sponsoring an event that gives you access to customers or prospects. As a KPI, we need to think like marketers here. We need to understand things like, did the event help us create new leads? And did the interaction that we had with an individual at the event, does it qualify as a lead based on your standard definition for an MQL or whatever lead stage that you would set up to be your first level lead stage? We also need to understand where we're interacting with current customers or current opportunities. Did our interactions at this event advance the opportunity? So did the time and dollars spent to get to the event, to do the event, to engage with our customer or prospect, we need to be able to associate that with an existing opportunity or an existing contract value and feel good that our time and money spent had a positive impact on those KPIs. So those are around pipeline building and pipeline acceleration. And then a third, just for the sake of time, and we could keep going, but a third might be you get to spend time with customers where you're deepening the relationship, and deepening the relationship impacts KPIs like customer satisfaction, like advocacy, like adoption, like the ability to impact upsell, cross-sell, renewal. Those types of KPIs should also apply to how you think about your event program, and again, having a mission for each of those journeys as we discussed in the call today.
Great, thank you. All right, here's another one. Do you define event attribution differently from your other marketing tactic attribution models?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it kind of piggybacks on that last one. I think as marketers, myself included, we're still fine-tuning and calibrating around what attribution means and what it should mean, and the various touch points in our attribution models and associating value and picking an attribution model. So kind of going back to the previous question and having a mission for journeys and understanding the specific touch points and interactions that events provide, which make them unique. And it goes back to that idea of the power of live events, because only live events can allow us to do these things. But I think in terms of attribution, we have to think of your events program and any specific event as a channel and a tactic, just like any other. So what does that mean? It means that we can't associate too much influence on the touch points and interactions that we can clearly associate with an event. We can't claim too much credit, so we can't be tempted to over-assign influence in our attribution model because today, with the ability to see all of the activity we have for a contact or an account before our event and how they engage with us, in most cases, there's been previous activity. So we have to bring all of that into context. And we also know that there's a lot of work to do post-event to advance the opportunity forward. And so I think the key here is be smart, claim credit where you can see it, where you can demonstrate it, Don't over-assign attribution, but there's really no reason, all that said, there's really no reason that your meeting and events program and the interactions you have cannot and should not fit into an existing attribution model. So do not be tempted to create an attribution model specific for events. Let's just treat it like any other channel or tactic that you're deploying in your marketing program.
Great. All right, got another good one here. What marketing channels do you see as most successful for driving event attendees?
These are really good questions, by the way. So I'm a believer in, we mentioned this, but multi-channel, omni-channel. There's no reason we shouldn't think about driving attendance to an event and using every available tool, tactic, channel. And so an integrated marketing plan that that's driving to a live event offer should include every available channel. It should include SEO. It should include pay-per-click. It should include display. It should include outbound email. It should include partner channels. It should include your seller. So let's maybe talk for a second about the role of sales in this equation, because I think for many of us, we have a love-hate relationship with our friends in sales, not in general anymore, but specific to events. Sometimes it's not clear the tasks that we want to give to sales to specifically around driving event attendance. And so that can be a channel for us that's super effective, but we have to set that up the right way because sales is very busy. Driving attendance to an event is one of many things that we ask sales to do. And so we have to show sales that it's worth their time because, again, back to the power of live, there is no more effective way to advance a relationship than when you're face-to-face. So we have to sell to sales the reason that they should be a channel for us, and then we have to make it easy for sales to do that. So I wanted to spend just a second on that one because I think sometimes we don't always get that right as marketers, and we could talk for another hour about just that channel or tactic. But to summarize this answer, all channels in a very focused way in the pre-event promotion as well as the post-event promotion. And for some of you that have multi-day events, there's going to be some touches that you're going to want to make during the event, so the in-event communications as well.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. So, all right, here we go. Can you talk about any differences between events you attend and events you host?
Yeah, and again, a really good question and a great one to end on. We talked about the way that Cvent views the world. We want to be able to power and support any event type anywhere in the world, those you attend versus those you host. So what are the major differences? Well, the obvious difference are the events you host, you have more control over everything. You have control over message. You have control over channel. You have control over the audience. You have control over the environment and the experience. So you have to understand that a lot of things change and some things don't change at all when we shift to how do we have an effective event experience for an event that we're attending as a sponsor, as an exhibitor, etc. So the key thing that I like to impress upon is it's very difficult in a sea of a lot of noise, a lot of competing messages for the audience that you want to reach to hear your message amongst various others. And so for that reason, it's super important to integrate your event marketing strategy with the overall marketing strategy. So what does that mean? It means take advantage of the engaged contacts you already have. Start there. Start with the accounts that you're already engaged with, the contacts you're already engaged with. Let them know well in advance the events that you'll be attending, their opportunities to interact with you, their opportunities to spend time with you. And as a best practice, you should go into a sponsored event scenario with a fair amount of preset appointments. So that would be a good metric and KPI for most of us, is to understand how many presets we have before we get on site. And if you're not getting those, it's likely because you're not tapping into the existing relationships you have. So if you base success for an event purely on brand new leads you might get post-event, you're going to fail most of the time. It has to be this blend of advancing current relationships and making new relationships and new leads. And so that's a major difference that I think would be a good one to end on for our time today.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Yep, that's all the time we have for questions today. Thanks for such an insightful presentation, and thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time to join us today. You could follow the link you see on the screen here to receive an on-demand version of this webinar, and we'll also, of course, drop it in your email inbox after the session. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.